What happens when the most dangerous gang members in the country are locked away in the most secure prison America has to offer? These are men who didn't simply serve time, they controlled it. For them, prison wasn't a place of confinement, it became their kingdom, where power was the only thing that mattered. And for those who crossed their path, it often meant something far worse. But who, out of these ruthless men, really claimed the title of the most dangerous? Stick with us as we take you through the rise of these men, from the least dangerous to the most feared. Along the way, you'll hear shocking revelations and untold stories that show just how these men terrorized the system from the inside. Stay until the end, because the final story will leave you questioning just how much fear one man can instill in an entire prison. In this video, we'll begin with the least dangerous of these infamous criminals and work our way up to the most dangerous. Each of these men played a significant role in the Aryan Brotherhood's firm grip on power inside the prison system. They were more than just inmates, they were leaders, masterminds, and figures of fear. But you'll want to stick around for the final reveal. The most dangerous of them all might surprise you. Let's start with the man who played a key role in the early days of the Aryan Brotherhood's rise to power. His criminal acts were undeniable, but as we go through the story, you'll see how his actions, though violent, would soon be overshadowed by others who would follow in his wake. Barry Mills was born in Windsor, California in 1948, and his life behind bars began much earlier than most could have imagined. By the time he reached his 70th birthday, he had spent nearly 3/4 of his life incarcerated. His story is one of transformation, how a young man seemingly lost in the criminal justice system became one of the most feared and powerful figures in America's prison system. But his journey wasn't always marked by the violence and terror that would later define him. It began, like many others, with a series of poor choices and a growing frustration with the world around him. In 1969, Barry Mills was convicted of armed robbery, and it was in the confines of prison that his criminal career truly began to take shape. But it wasn't until he entered the notorious San Quentin prison that the darkest chapters of his life would unfold. It was there that Mills found the Aryan Brotherhood, a gang that would become the foundation of his legacy. As he entered the gang, he began to rise through the ranks, not by chance, but by design. He was ambitious, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it took to climb to the top. His presence became undeniable, and as his power grew, so did his influence. He became the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood, guiding the gang's operations and ensuring its reach extended far beyond the walls of San Quentin. Under his leadership, the Aryan Brotherhood's grip on the nation's prisons became unshakable, with Mills orchestrating a criminal empire that spanned beyond just drugs. Barry Mills was involved in countless violent acts, including multiple murders, each one carried out with chilling precision. His criminal empire flourished, and in 2006 the law finally caught up with him. Mills was convicted of murder and racketeering, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. By then, it was too late. The damage had already been done, and Mills had already cemented his place in history as one of the most dangerous men to ever walk the halls of America's prisons. His actions had left a trail of destruction that was felt across the nation. But there was a side to Barry Mills that few ever saw. A side that would come as a surprise to many. Beneath the layers of violence, manipulation, and control, there was a quiet and unexpected tenderness. Despite his brutal reputation, in the solitude of his prison cell, Barry Mills found solace in something that seemed completely out of place for a man of his stature: embroidery. In those moments, far from the chaos and bloodshed, Mills would sit and stitch. But here's the most shocking part of Barry Mills' story. Despite being the leader of one of the deadliest prison gangs in the world, Barry Mills spent his final years behind bars, embroidering in his cell. It was a jarring contrast, almost surreal, to think of the same man who had orchestrated countless murders and controlled a prison gang with an iron fist, quietly stitching in a cell, his hands moving with the precision of a craftsman. It's a moment that captures the paradox of his life. a man whose name became synonymous with bloodshed, yet who found peace in the simplest of tasks. However, as we move through the story of these men, it becomes clear that Barry Mills' reign of terror, while significant, wasn't the most dangerous. His influence was undeniable, his power immense, but it would eventually be overshadowed by another figure, someone who would rise to even greater heights of violence and control. Tyler Bingham, a man of greater power and ruthlessness, would take the Aryan Brotherhood in a direction that would forever change the gang and leave a lasting impact on the prison system. Bingham's story, while deeply entwined with Mills, would show just how far the Aryan Brotherhood could go under the influence of a man who was willing to do anything to maintain power. As we'll soon see, Bingham's story is one of manipulation, control, and violence on a scale that was beyond even Barry Mills' reach. Tyler Bingham was born in 1947, and much of his life was spent behind the cold, unforgiving walls of America's prison system. For Bingham, it was more than that. It became his domain, a space where he could rise to power and wield a level of control that few could ever imagine. Like many others in the Aryan Brotherhood, Bingham's journey into the criminal underworld began within the confines of the prison system. His life was filled with violence, and it didn't take long before his ruthless nature caught the attention of those around him. He was deeply embedded in racketeering, a variety of violent crimes, and most notably murder. His involvement in such high-level criminal acts would eventually solidify his reputation as one of the most dangerous men within the Aryan Brotherhood. What made him particularly dangerous, however, wasn't just the murders he committed or the acts of violence he orchestrated. What set him apart was his extraordinary ability to maintain control, even while being confined to the smallest and most isolated spaces. His criminal empire was about the violence, the way he managed it. After being sentenced to life in prison, Bingham was placed in solitary confinement, but being behind bars didn't mean his influence would dissipate. In solitary, most men would fade from the world outside, left to rot away in isolation. But not Bingham. His cell became his command center. From there, he orchestrated a number of violent attacks, directed fellow gang members, and maintained a suffocating control over the operations of the Aryan Brotherhood. His ability to manipulate events, to dictate the movements of others while locked in a solitary cell, is nothing short of extraordinary. It was as if the walls of his confinement didn't exist at all. In 2006, Bingham's life took another dark turn when he was convicted of murder and racketeering. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. By then, he had cemented his status as a powerful and dangerous figure within the Aryan Brotherhood. But even behind the walls of solitary confinement, his influence remained undeniable. While most people would be rendered powerless in such a setting, Bingham continued to command the same level of respect and fear that most men can only dream of. He wasn't just surviving in prison, he was thriving. His control over the gang, his ability to manipulate from behind bars, was both chilling and impressive. Bingham wasn't just a figure of authority. He was a force, one that could bend the system to his will from the confines of a cell. When we look at Bingham through the lens of psychology, we see a man who was calm, controlled, and ruthlessly strategic. Unlike many others who were driven by emotions or impulsive decisions, Bingham's actions were calculated, deliberate, and chilling. He didn't act on rage or fear. He acted with the cold precision of a man who understood exactly how far fear could stretch. His ability to manipulate his gang members, to control their actions, and to continue orchestrating violence while isolated is a testament to just how powerful his mind was. Even when physically separated from the world, Bingham never lost his grip on it. The most astonishing and shocking fact about Tyler Bingham is that, despite his conviction, despite the isolation, he remained a powerful figure within the Aryan Brotherhood. His influence didn't end when the doors to his solitary cell closed. In fact, it seemed to grow stronger with time. Bingham's reach extended far beyond the physical barriers of his confinement. His ability to orchestrate violence, to manipulate and control from a space that would leave most men powerless, was a testament to the unique and terrifying power he possessed. His name still struck fear in the hearts of those within the system, even as he spent his days isolated and removed from the rest of the world. But as dangerous as Tyler Bingham was, his story, incredible and terrifying as it is, takes a back seat to another figure, the one who instilled the most fear in everyone he encountered. His reign of terror went beyond even Bingham's manipulations, and his legacy looms larger than life. His influence, his control, and the fear he generated was something no one could match. Let's now turn to Thomas Silverstein. Thomas Silverstein was born in Long Beach, California in 1952. By the time he became a household name within the prison system, his actions had made him one of the most infamous figures associated with the Aryan Brotherhood. Silverstein wasn't born into the criminal world, but once he entered the system, it became clear that he would leave a mark like few others. His criminal history is steeped in violence, and it didn't take long for him to make a name for himself. In 1983, Silverstein committed one of his most notorious acts, the murder of a correctional officer, Merle Klutz. This murder wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was cold, calculated, and part of a larger plan to instill fear within the system. The officer's death earned Silverstein a permanent place in solitary confinement, but even there he wasn't removed from the influence he wielded. It only solidified his position within the Brotherhood. Silverstein's confinement would become a symbol of his immense danger. He spent 36 years in solitary confinement, the longest anyone had ever served in the federal prison system. While others might have broken down under such isolation, Silverstein thrived in it. Solitary became his kingdom, a place where he could rule with fear, despite being locked away from the rest of the world. His personality was one that commanded respect. Silverstein ruled the prison with an iron fist, but it wasn't just through violence. His control extended beyond physical intimidation. He had a way of controlling the minds of those around him, using fear as a tool to bend them to his will. He wasn't just a figure to be feared for his actions, he was feared for his presence. One look at him and you knew he was the man in charge. Silverstein was the embodiment of fear itself. There is one shocking fact that sets Silverstein apart from the others. Despite being locked away in solitary confinement for nearly 4 decades, his presence still managed to terrorize the entire prison system. Guards, even those who had never interacted with him directly, refused to speak to him out of respect for the guard he murdered. Even in isolation, Silverstein's aura of terror was so profound that it haunted those around him. No one dared challenge his power, not even the prison system itself. There is one shocking fact that sets Silverstein apart from the others. Despite being locked away in solitary confinement for nearly 4 decades, his presence still managed to terrorize the entire prison system. Guards, even those who had never interacted with him directly, refused to speak to him out of respect for the guard he murdered. Even in isolation, Silverstein's aura of terror was so profound that it haunted those around him. No one dared challenge his power, not even the prison system itself. Silverstein's reign was one of complete terror. It wasn't confined to any one place or time. Even though he spent his final years isolated from society, the fear he instilled in others was far from isolated. It spread through every corner of the prison system, influencing not just those in the Aryan Brotherhood, but everyone who crossed his path. Thomas Silverstein may have been locked away for most of his life, but in many ways he remained free to terrorize, free to command, and free to leave a legacy of fear that would endure long after his death. Each of these men brought a unique, almost unfathomable form of danger to the Aryan Brotherhood. They weren't just ordinary criminals, they were masters of fear, each ruling their domain with a level of control that most couldn't begin to comprehend. Their power wasn't simply about force, it wasn't about who could inflict the most pain or who was the most physically imposing. In the dark, isolated world of ADX Florence, control meant something far deeper. It wasn't about fighting your way to the top. It was about how well you could manipulate the environment, how much influence you could wield over the lives of others, and most of all, how much fear you could instill in everyone around you. These men weren't feared simply for what they had done. They were feared for the shadows they cast over the prison system. Fear was their weapon, and with it they shaped the system to their will. Even from within the confines of their solitary cells, their presence lingered in the air like a storm waiting to erupt. They controlled more than just the men around them. They controlled the very environment, the pulse of the prison itself. So, as we reflect on their stories, the question becomes, who truly stands at the top? Who became the most dangerous in a place where even the strongest couldn't hold power without fear? Barry Mills, with his strategic mind and his capacity for manipulation, was a terrifying figure. He played a critical role in the Aryan Brotherhood's rise, expanding their influence and ensuring their dominance within the prison system. His reach was long, and his methods were calculated. He ruled not with brute force, but with the kind of control that made even the toughest men in the system bend to his will. But even Mills' influence, as vast as it was, began to pale in comparison to others who came after him. Then there's Tyler Bingham. Despite being locked away in solitary confinement for years, he continued to wield power. His ability to manipulate from behind bars was unlike anything anyone had seen before. He directed operations, orchestrated violence, and controlled his gang from a cell so isolated that most would have been forgotten by the world, but not Tyler Bingham. He was calm, controlled, and ruthless in a way that made him terrifying. He was a man who could pull strings from the shadows, directing chaos without even stepping foot outside his cell. And then there's Thomas Silverstein, a man who lived in isolation for 36 years, the longest time anyone had spent in solitary confinement within the federal system. And yet, he was never truly isolated. His name echoed throughout the prison, as his reputation was a constant reminder to everyone around him that fear, in its purest form, could shape reality. Silverstein wasn't just feared because of his violent acts. He was feared because his presence alone carried a weight that forced everyone to respect him. Guards would not speak to him, out of respect for the guard he killed. His reign over the prison system was complete, even if he was physically locked away from everyone else. So, with all of these men, each one brutal, each one powerful, each one capable of terror, who truly stands at the top? Who among them holds the title of the most dangerous? Was it Barry Mills, who masterminded the Aryan Brotherhood's expansion? Was it Tyler Bingham, who controlled the gang from within the isolation of his cell, orchestrating violence like a puppeteer pulling the strings? Or was it Thomas Silverstein, a man whose very name evoked terror, a man whose reach and influence were felt even in the deepest corners of solitary confinement? I want to hear from you. Who do you think was the most dangerous? Was it Barry Mills with his intelligence and strategic leadership? Was it Tyler Bingham, whose ability to manipulate from behind prison walls seemed almost supernatural? Or was it Thomas Silverstein, a man whose name alone could make the toughest men tremble? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, share your opinions, and tell us who, in your eyes, truly earned the title of the most dangerous. Which of these men do you find the most terrifying? Each of them left their mark on the prison system, but as you heard today, their methods and the fear they instilled were not the same. Barry Mills, Tyler Bingham, Thomas Silverstein, they were each dangerous in their own way. But who stands out as the most fearsome of them all? Was it the mastermind who controlled the gang from behind bars? The man who orchestrated violence with chilling precision? Or the one whose name alone could stop conversations in their tracks? Or perhaps as you think about this, you realize that there are others out there, other dangerous figures who should have been on this list. Maybe you know of someone whose name has been forgotten by the public eye, but whose reputation in the prison world still lingers. If you do, let us know your thoughts. Who do you think truly deserves to be counted among the most dangerous? And while you're at it, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We have more gripping true crime stories coming your way, stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, questioning the boundaries of fear, power, and control. Your voice matters, so share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us who you believe was the most dangerous and why. And stay tuned, because we have so much more to uncover. The Aryan Brotherhood gang members we've discussed today didn't just break the law. They became legends in the world of prison crime. Their stories have lived on not because they simply served time behind bars, but because they controlled it, they shaped it, and they instilled a level of fear that lasted far beyond their prison sentences. They didn't fade into the background like so many others. They became figures of terror whose names will never be forgotten in the dark corners of the prison system. But as we reflect on their reign, the question still lingers: who truly was the most dangerous of them all? Some might point to Thomas Silverstein, whose reign over the system was so immense that even the toughest guards wouldn't speak to him. But perhaps the most dangerous criminals are not the ones we know well, but the ones whose stories remain hidden, the ones whose influence continues to ripple through the prison system, out of sight, out of mind. Who's next on our list of dangerous criminals? Stay tuned for our next story, where we'll uncover more chilling tales from behind bars, more shocking crimes, more untold stories, and more figures whose power and fear still echo today. These are the people the world tries to forget, but we're here to ensure that their stories never fade. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. We've got plenty more shocking true crime stories coming your way. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Your support helps bring these stories to light. So stay with us as we continue this journey into the darkest corners of the criminal world.